are listening to WHOA Podcast, coming to you from Gainesville, Florida. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the WHOA GNV Podcast, the podcast bringing you businesses and individuals that make you go, whoa. I am your host, Collin Austin, and my co-host is Michael D.
Always at the ready. I never know when you're going to throw me like that, but here we are.
Just like point with the whoa. Let's go. Oh, man, we're having fun already. We haven't even started the episode. That's the way it goes. What is up, man? How are you?
I'm well.
It's Monday, August 10th.
That's right. Usually we're in the middle of a busy back-to-school scooter season, and
maybe.
We'll see what happens. We're here for it. We're ready.
Tyler, is school going to start on time?
I don't know. Coming from somebody who has a teenager, I want to know the same thing.
Right. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and more importantly, we're going to have a football season. That's what everybody
Tyler,
really
we're going to have a football season?
I really
We're going to get
hope
all the
so.
answers tonight from Tyler. Tyler.
Yeah. I'll bring all the answers.
Tyler, tell us everything. We're going to have football season?
I really hope so.
Hope is not the answer I was going for, Tyler.
Yes, we are going to have a football season.
Today on the show, you guys, we have the owner and founder of Swamp City Gallery Lounge, Tyler King. Tyler, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
How you been? Doing all right?
I've been doing all right.
We're all loose and having fun tonight. So, Tyler, man, we like to start. I'm really excited about this episode because I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of place this up front. I think there's a lot of people are gonna be like, really? Like, isn't this like weed focused?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
It's like CBD. Like you hear all
Yeah.
these terms like
Yeah.
CBD and like cannabis and like the upcoming cannabis companies and all this sort of stuff. So I'm really interested to get into this episode, and I wanted to intentionally like have this episode. I want to be like, all right, like let's find out the truth. Like let's have a real conversation. Let's get educated.
Absolutely.
By Tyler King, right? So, but before we do that, I'm really curious to kind of just dive right in, hear a little bit of your story, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So born and raised in Gainesville.
ACR, baby, let's go.
Yeah. Grew up on Noonan's Lake. So I kind of shrink it down. I could give you the long version, but we'll be here all night. So basically, my passion in cannabis started back in middle school. Believe it or not, I was going to Fort Clark Middle School. 7th grade science fair project. I decided to do my science fair project on the medicinal benefits of cannabis. And this is back, I graduated in 2005. So this is before legalization was ever thought of in Florida by far. Was just starting out on the West Coast. So it was very taboo, so to speak.
Can I stop you right there real quick? I want you to tell your story. I'll apologize in advance if I interrupt it throughout this. But like, why in the 7th grade did you even have like a curiosity about cannabis? Do you have any?
I have no idea, honestly. I'll be honest with you. Like, my mom, was kind of a hippie growing up, but not really. It wasn't like I grew up around it or anything like that. I had heard stories being out on Noonan's Lake. I'd always heard stories of the famous Gainesville Green, stuff like that, Micanopy Madness, all these notorious strains. And I never really knew why it piqued my interest. But then once I dove in, I was like, man, I'm going to make a living out of this. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Did you know that in 7th grade? Yeah, I had a pretty good inclination in 7th grade. That's what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was there was two things. It was either I wanted to be a mechanic, which you work on scooters, so you understand that. I went to school to be an auto mechanic, so it was either be a mechanic or be in the cannabis industry. And I did that 7th grade science fair project, and they called a PTA meeting to have my mom come in and tell her about how much of a deadbeat I was going to be, and I wasn't going to amount to anything because I'm decided to do my project on medical cannabis, and obviously I'm a pothead, quote unquote. And
please tell me you won the science fair.
I got a B+ on my science fair project. My science teacher will see one of these episodes one day and will come out. So got a B+. She was the only one that didn't ridicule me for it, because there was actual science. I mean, it was very minuscule back then, but there was science about it. It was, like I said, legalization. It was just starting on the West Coast and stuff like that. So, I did that science fair project, and that's what really piqued my interest. And then, for the next, 10 years or so, I was just a juvenile kid, smoking with his friends and experimenting, in ways that you're not supposed to.
Business research.
Yeah, R&D, absolutely,
right.
R&D. And fast forward to, I'd say when I was about 15, I started really diving in. I started being an avid cannabis user. Then when I was 21, I was in a construction injury. I was in an accident while working down in Tampa, and I had a piece of pipe fall on me, and I blew out 3 of my lower discs in my back, L2 through L5. And so I was dealing with the pain management, the prescriptions, this, that, and the other. And I found a lot of relief in cannabis. And it was
prescribed to you?
No, the cannabis was not prescribed at all. So, but
this was before
legalization or anything. So I found technically illegal relief, in cannabis, but I was being pushed on by all these hard pharmaceuticals and stuff that made me feel like a ghost of myself, made me feel like somebody who I wasn't. So I realized, I was like, man, there's really something to this. Before I was just kind of smoking with my buddies, but this, I had actually used it for my own relief instead of just reading it in a book. And then that's when I started being an avid cannabis user, and I guess you could say activist, pushing for legalization, so on and so forth. Started reading about people in California, Jack Herrar, Dr. Grimspoon, all these famous activists and growers and cultivators. And then I got an option, or basically a friend of mine had moved out to California and was going to start up a dispensary. And this was, I'm jumping around here, but basically 2011 was when I got the opportunity to move out to California and legally pursue my passion in cannabis. So I ripped up everything I knew, and I moved all the way across the country.
What year was this?
2011, late 2011, going on 2012. So I moved all the way out to California, lived in Brentwood up near the Bay Area, and started being a delivery driver for a dispensary, driving around delivering cannabis to different patients in the area. And I got to see it firsthand when I was delivering to these people, the change that I could see within 5 to 10 minutes. Like, I would bring them their medicine. A lot of them would have cerebral palsy or, something, ALS, something where they could barely walk or talk. And I'd come in and give them to their caretaker or to them. And within 10 or 15 minutes, they would become a completely normal person like me or you. You wouldn't know they had any ailments. So that even further opened my eyes, and I was like, man, this is nothing short of a miracle, and I said, you know what, we're going to start our own company. So out there in 2012, early 2012, after delivering for other companies for about 6 or 8 months, I started Alchemy of Cannabis, which is a delivery service in Brentwood. Started it up with a partner of mine, and we had a great success. We had over 300 patients. We were delivering all over the Bay Area. Needless to say, you need to figure out who your partners are before you go into business with them, because money changes people. And I ended up having to sue my business partner. I won the lawsuit, but never got paid. But I got the pivotal point of this is I got to legally pursue my passion. I got to further my knowledge. I got to witness the miracle firsthand, and I was able to bring that back home to Florida, because come 2014, after being out there for about 2.5 years, I got wind that Florida was finally talking about legalizing cannabis. So I said, you know what, maybe it's time to go back home and get on the front line instead of being on the back, because it got legalized medically out in California in '96. So I was on the tail end of it.
When did it happen in Florida?
So medically in 2016, low THC, which is CBD, or low THC, was technically legalized in 2014. Yeah. So I came home in 2014, started rallying, printed out 100 shirts, went up to Tallahassee, talked to the people up there, started helping out and lobbying. Unfortunately, it did not pass in 2014, and we got 60% of the vote, actually 58% of the vote, which is a majority if I'm not mistaken, right? So we got 58% of the vote for legalization, but due to Florida and Florida being Florida, it was a super majority clause. So you have to have over 60% if you wanted to pass cannabis legalization or medical cannabis in the state of Florida. So even though we got 58%, no legalization. Governor Rick Scott at the time did legalize and pass through the Charlotte's Web bill, which legalized for low THC. But as far as full-strength medical cannabis, it wouldn't be for another 2 years until it was back on the ballot. And then in 2016, we blew it out the water with the highest percentage of any state for medical cannabis vote, 72.3% in favor. Okay. So you can't really argue with that number. So
I have so many questions. My first is, what was the hypothesis of your science project?
Man, I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly, but basically it was to, I specifically remember that a lot of the studies back then was for heart disease, and basically it was proven that it could lower your blood pressure, help with the heart, and actually help with, believe it or not, help with lungs, like your bronchial tubes and bronchial dilators.
So is this true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, there's been studies, numerous studies since then proving it.
Okay.
So when I moved back in 2014, I said, I want to do what I did out in California here. My hometown doesn't have anything like that. We need something like that. So 2014, couldn't do it. I started another business, which I do besides Swamp City, which is Gainesville Green Blasting, which is a mobile sandblasting company. But I did that to play off of the notorious strain Gainesville Green. So we're Gainesville Green Blasting because we use eco-friendly material, but it's green. So we played off of that. And basically that was a way of me twiddling my fingers and not having idle hands for 2 years while I figured out what I was going to do. And then in 2016, it went legal, medical cannabis. And I was like, man, I'm going to open the dispensaries. Finally, my dreams are going to come true to do this in my home state. Well, Florida being Florida, they made it to where none of the little guys, no mom and pops or anything could get in the industry. Basically, to make a long story short, just to apply to have a dispensary in the state of Florida is a $68,000 non-refundable application fee. That's just the application fee. They've taken over 12 different applicants' application fee and not given them a dispensary license. So they've made ton of money off of just not giving out license. So basically the industry in Florida is monopolized. It's seed to sell. You have to be a millionaire with millions in bonds. You have to own the property, own the stores, cultivate, own the houses. It's vertical integrated, so it's not a competitive market, so to speak. I mean, it's great because we're bringing access to the people in Florida who need it, and it's legal. But it sucks in the aspect that it's not a competitive market and there's no room for people like myself to get in at the medical cannabis level, which is why when I realized that, I said, hey, I'm not just going to sit here and be idle. So I started digging into CBD and the legalities of the CBD, and I had played with CBD out when we were doing the dispensary out in California, and we had some CBD strains, but it wasn't really popular. Everybody wanted the stuff that quote unquote gets you high, so nobody was really worried about CBD back then. But with the little girl named Charlotte and Charlotte's Web, she was one that kind of opened everybody's eyes to CBD. Sanjay Gupta did a thing on CNN. It was called Weed, and it was basically all about Charlotte and her story. And it took this little girl from having 300 grand mal seizures a day to having like 2 a month off of just CBD oil. And if that doesn't open your eyes, I don't know what will. So it obviously opened our governor's eyes, and that's why he legalized it. And I said, you know what? There's something to this. CBD is cannabis. Cannabis is CBD. Hemp is cannabis. It's all cannabis. It's just different varieties. And that's what I wanted to do. So I decided to pivot and think, and I've always wanted to when I was out there, I wanted to open a glass gallery that kind of involved art and cannabis. So I decided I'm going to open a CBD lounge and an art gallery, and that's what I did. And that's when in late 2016, Swamp City, the idea was born. And then I started traveling around doing events before we were ever brick and mortar. And then in late 2017, we found our first location. It took about 6 months of remodel. It was an old Victorian house, awesome house. Put a lot of time and money into that place. And then in 2018, spring 2018, we officially opened. Swamp City Gallery Lounge was a thing. And basically, our whole goal and our whole slogan and mantra is basically it's a peaceful environment for like-minded individuals to come together and expand on creative concepts. So we're using art and music and all these other things that everybody enjoys from all walks of life to bring them together and educate them on cannabis. And maybe cannabis is something they already desire and they already like. So that's another catalyst to bridge all these different demographics. So basically, what Swamp City is a place where you can come in and whether you enjoy art, you enjoy beer because we do beer and wine, you enjoy music because we do live music, or you enjoy cannabis, you can come in and hang out with other people who enjoy similar things without fear of discrimination or hate. So, and that's I felt like Gainesville really needed that, and I'm honored that I could provide that for my hometown.
It's cool. I mean, I'm kind of fascinated. I'm just kind of sitting back, listening, and I'm like, dang. It's funny because I'm just gonna be straight with you.
Be blunt with me. No pun intended.
Yeah. I never smoked weed in my life, right?
Yeah.
I actually kind of hesitated even having this episode.
Absolutely. Hey, man, I deal with that everywhere I go.
And so that's where my question's coming from, right?
Yeah.
That's where this is actually why I wanted to have the episode.
Yeah.
Straight up, because one of the things that I continue to do for myself is push outside the comfort zones, bring up the conversations that a lot of people might not be comfortable having.
Absolutely.
And really I don't know, shoot down is the right word, but dispel the preconceived notions or perceptions that people have of certain things, right? It's kind of like, okay, so let's just have a real conversation about it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, when I hear things like CBD, I think weed.
Yeah.
Right? That's pretty common?
No, you should. And a lot of people get that confused. They think CBD is something different, but it's not. It's all cannabis. And the easiest way to explain it to people is like a dog is a dog, right? But you got pit bulls, you've got
So it's a
mutts.
different
It's a different breed.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what are the most common misconceptions that people have about CBD oil?
They think it's a different plant. They think that it's derived from hemp, and it is derived from hemp, but all hemp is a definition of a cannabis plant that contains less than 0.3% THC. So it is cannabis, and so when you tell people that, they're like, whoa, I'm not smoking weed, I'm smoking CBD, or doing CBD oil. And you are using cannabis, and it is all the same plant, but it is just different varieties and different breeds. And the new CBD strains that we are seeing is through selective breeding. Basically, these growers found strains that had higher CBD and lower THC, and they said, hey, we're going to breed.
What does CBD even mean?
So it stands for cannabidiol, which is one of the main compounds in cannabis. So you have THC and CBD. Those are
What's THC stand for?
So tetrahydrocannabidiol. So basically, THC is.
Do you know all this? Do you know some of it?
Should I admit that?
Yeah, I want to know.
No, I mean, I probably couldn't have told you the exact definition of it, but yeah, I mean, I'm following.
Okay.
Yeah. So and THC is
Sarah,
what.
do you know this? James? Yeah.
I see him nodding his head the whole time.
Some people are I mean, I don't know. I'm asking people in the room, what did. I'm kind of.
I have a drug
really
test on my
interested
desk
to know
tomorrow.
where people stand on this. I don't know.
So THC is basically what everybody correlates with weed. That's what gets you high. It's what makes you silly. It's what gives you the munchies. What's make you, sleepy. Hungry, happy, sleepy is what we call it. So, but, CBD doesn't really do any of those psychoactive effects. It doesn't make you cloudy. It doesn't intoxicate you. What it does do is help with inflammation, tinnitus, arthritis, stress, anxiety, basically any natural ailment that your body has is going to go in there and help your body heal itself in a more efficient way. And it's not a drug. It's not it's not something that you're putting in your body that your body doesn't know what to do with, like a pharmaceutical or something like that has a bunch of nasty side effects. Scientists just in the past 3 or 4 years discovered a whole new system in the body called the endocannabinoid system. And basically we have receptors in our brain called the CB1 and CB2 receptors. And when we smoke or ingest or any of these things of cannabis, the compounds go in there and they attach to these receptors and they act in different ways, and they help our body basically, like with the CBD, and you have tons of other compounds, CBG, CBN, CBC, and we're just starting to study those, but the two most known are THC and CBD. And CBD is huge for anti-inflammatory. Like a lot of people don't know, CBD has 5 times the anti-inflammatory properties of Tylenol or ibuprofen, but no side effects, and it doesn't kill your liver.
So where? Here's a loaded question.
Shoot it.
Where does the conspiracy theory lie? Because question authority. Why were we ever told that it was a bad substance, that it was illegal, that it was harmful?
Politics.
Right. And so the problem that I have, and this is a diatribe, right? But like the problem that I have is right before COVID happened, at least in the United States, we were starting to shine a whole hell of a lot of light on the opioid crisis here.
Yeah.
And you talked about, having that pipe hit your back and being prescribed pharmaceutical drugs, which is, it exists like it does here in America because of our capitalist economy.
Yeah.
And something as humble as a plant, thank you, something as humble as a plant has been demonized and passed down generationally as something that you can't touch or shouldn't touch, or it's bad. And it has all these healing properties, and it's much safer, and this is a question, you would agree, right, I assume, than these opioids.
Absolutely. 10-fold, 100-fold.
So is it just our own plausible deniability, our own investment into capitalist economy, that we would rather see the pharmaceutical industry thrive because it's making millionaires, billionaires, and another vertically integrated business? Or like why aren't we saying, hey, there's something to this, it's new industry, let's invest into it and run,
So you're seeing both of that right now. You're seeing the suits starting to realize the money, and they are starting to buy up so they are trying to get into it. You have all these big corporations like Canopy Growth. There's a lot of corporations here in Gainesville, here in Florida, that own dispensaries that are not. None of them are actually from Florida. So you have all these huge corporations that are seeing what's happening in Colorado, are seeing what's happening in California, and are seeing all the money being made off of this by the little guys who are risking their necks and their backs to do it. And they say, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to buy all you guys out, and we're going to keep all the money for ourselves. So you're seeing that, and then you're also seeing the prohibition, the ever lingering prohibition to cannabis that will just not go away. And that is basically, in my opinion, stems from nothing but brainwashed individuals who grew up in that era, the Reefer Madness era. They made movies about it, they made commercials about it. It was, I don't know if y'all know this, but basically it was all DuPont and Plastics basically teamed up with a gentleman named Henry Anslinger back in the 50s to create all of this propaganda and everything, because they knew that hemp and hemp plastics would put them out of business. So they say, oh, we're not going to do that. We're going to make you think that if you smoke weed, that the Mexicans and the blacks are going to come rape your wives. And then it turned into a racist thing. and that only the Mexicans and the blacks were smoking cannabis, and that the jazz musicians were smoking cannabis, and they would come and rape your wives and take them home with them, and and then all it was propaganda. It was complete lies, and that's where it started. And you had like 10 or 15 years of that nonstop, and people like my grandma, who just passed away, she was just starting. Like, my grandma was 85, and she was just starting to use my CBD oil, just starting to experiment with, because of the way she was taught, and she was a nurse, and so back then, strictly Western medicine, absolutely no to cannabis, because that was also a threat to the Western medicine and the pharmaceutical company. So it was a threat to the pharmaceutical company. It was a threat to the DuPont plastics. And so they decided, how are we going to deal with this? Well, we're going to make a bunch of propaganda films and make everybody believe that it's evil. And that's where we are today. And we still, 60-something years later, have lingering prohibition. We still have people that think if you smoke weed, you're going to go crazy, which is crazy. So, you know what I mean? And that's the main thing we do at Swamp City, man, is it's not about selling you CBD. It's not about selling you a beer. It's not about, it's about having a good time. But while we're having a good time, I want to educate you. I want to educate you on what CBD is. I want to educate you on why we're all here.
Tyler, obviously a lot of this comes from, the things we were talking about, even just say weed, right? Like,
yeah.
A lot of it just comes from the fact that people abuse it.
Yeah.
Right? Is that it? Like,
anything to an extreme is a bad thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there is those stereotypical potheads that are not a good look for our industry. You know what I mean? And there has been, with the whole hippie movement and everything, I think, it kind of made a little dent on the cannabis movement. And there are certain things out there that definitely don't look good for the industry. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, there absolutely has been people out there who have made a bad mark or a black mark on the cannabis industry. So it sets us back as the industry as a whole. Like, we're trying to progress this thing and be a legit industry, maybe one day we'll be able to use the banks. You know what I mean? Be a legit industry and be recognized as such. But when you have things
what does that mean for you? What does being a legit industry mean for you?
Honestly, being recognized by the federal government, being able to use the federal banking system, stuff like that. Being on a federal level, when I say that, is basically what I'm talking about.
My problem is, what do you think this podcast would look like if we were all sitting here smoking joints?
It would look amazing.
I saw I saw Elon Musk do it on
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan
everybody thinks about, right? But if we were doing that, that has a certain perception, right? And a certain perception that I'm sure we would want to shy away from because of what it looks like to our audience or to our parents or to anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So why is this okay?
Ding, 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 ding.
That's my question. I hate the hypocrisy and stuff.
Because it was never demonized. Well, it was demonized at one point, but not to the extent. But there's no prohibition.
We've decided that that's
for everybody
okay.
who's listening, please explain.
I have this wonderful Goose IPA out of Chicago.
So much of our audience listens; they don't watch the show, so you got to explain it.
That's true. I always forget about that little
detail. Mike picked up a beer can.
Yeah.
Everybody. Why is this okay?
We occasionally, drink on this podcast, have a good time, loosen up. It's after hours. It's right now we're recording. It's 9:15 p.m. We've had some nice scotches, open bars.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Exactly.
See, I didn't know there was scotch.
Dude, it looks like
I said no to beer because I serve beer at my shop. Sure. I get sick of beer.
Right. But we've accepted one and we demonize another. And I asked the question, why, other than the fact that it's illegal.
But doesn't that vary by person? Because some people are going to look at alcohol and they're going to say, so when I look, I don't smoke weed, but I'm not necessarily.
But not to the dramatic, like in his defense, the crowd that's going to look at alcohol and say, oh, that's bad, is like this.
It's smaller
compared to people that look at cannabis and are like, oh my God, you're a pothead, and.
So you're saying that that's because of the perception that's been created up to this point?
Yeah, it's been perpetuated.
So let's say cannabis legalizes across America, right? Mm-hmm. Then that changes, right? Because then is it like alcohol at that point?
Well, it changes, and it'll definitely change. So it's just like with anything. I hate to say it, but with the ones that are completely set in their ways and that have no that will not open their eyes to the science or change their ways or learn new things will eventually die off, and things will change. And that's, what we kind of seeing right now with our government and stuff like that. We've got, and that's the reason it's not legalized on a federal level is we've got 70 and 80-year-olds running our country who grew up in the reefer madness era.
Right.
So.
This is fun. At what point does the industry do it to themselves? And what I mean, where I'm going with this is kind of like, you see like cannabis gummies. Mm-hmm. Like it's almost like they're trying to gamify it in a way, or like it's like cool to get high. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That would be like that'd be like the alcohol, and going back to the alcohol industry, it'd be like the alcohol industry being like, yo, it's cool to get hammered.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of the way I'm having a very transparent conversation here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way it could appear to somebody, is that you're kind of gamifying weed, and it's cool to like eat these gummies and get high.
Yeah.
Just like menthol cigarettes
So
or
like,
flavored vapes or candy cigarettes or anything like that people fear are like marketing to kids, right?
Right.
Like,
and there is I agree with that. And if you're marketing like with the packaging and stuff like that, you shouldn't be specifically marketing to kids. You shouldn't be putting it on, candy packages that are specifically marketed to kids. I agree with that in some extent. But at the same time, it is a lifestyle, and there is people out there that love their gummies. And I'm not saying the packaging shouldn't be directed towards kids, shouldn't be full of colors and all this and that. But there is a need for weed gummies out there. I'll just say that. But actually,
what is that need?
So CBD, actually, our CBD gummies at the shop is one of our top sellers, and people, because it's easy, it tastes good, they don't have to drip an oil under their tongue, it's something that's discreet, so if they eat a gummy at work or wherever, or if they're feeling stressed out and they can eat a gummy, it's not like I have to step outside and hit a vape pen. I can just eat a gummy. So
yeah.
I love the he looks over here at me like I'm just trying to bring a great show.
Right.
I'm trying to have conversations that I normally wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. And like it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I'm super interested to kind of see what our audience thinks about it and the different perceptions. I love to dive into the different perceptions. One of the things that I think I've gotten a lot better at over the years is definitely placing myself in the shoes of other people and trying to look at it from their viewpoint,
absolutely.
and trying to understand. There's so much happening in our world right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, man. I mean, hell, you don't even have to talk about weed. You can talk about COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like mask, no mask.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like there's so many different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just try to like put myself in the shoes of others, and I love having conversations exactly like this one because I just want to get further educated. I want to understand deeper.
Right.
I'm super interested to know. Going back to 7th grade,
Yeah.
where did you even know of cannabis?
So
Like, were
believe it
your
or not, it was in my it was in my science book.
It was in your science
Yeah, it was
book.
in my science
Okay.
book. We were studying. It was biology, and we were studying. It was a section with plants, and I opened it up, and there was a weed leaf, and it talked about, briefly, maybe 2 paragraphs about cannabis and about how there had been medicinal uses throughout history, such and such, and that was basically what I was like, you know what, that's what I'm gonna do. And
Did you know that it was related to getting high, the weed, pot,
so by middle school, yeah, absolutely, I did. Yeah.
I mean, I think cool.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Hold on, I got a contact that's going. I'm gonna try to ask it.
What did your parents? I mean, when you told your parents you want to do your science project on this, what did they think?
So,
What do they think now?
I mean, they both support me.
Okay.
My mom was and is a cannabis user. My dad as well. But it wasn't, like I said, again, it wasn't anything I grew up in the house with. My parents weren't supportive of it. They didn't smoke around me or anything like that. It wasn't like I grew up and it was just there. But I did start, experimenting with friends at an early age, 12, 13, and smoking around and so I already knew about it at that age. And then when my mom, came to the PTA meeting, and obviously I had told her what I was going to do the report on, and at first she was like, you think that's a great idea? And I was like, well, in middle school, I was kind of a rebel. I just didn't really want to be there. Middle school was kind of in between. I loved elementary, and then middle school was like, and then high school was fun. But yeah, she was supportive of it, and because I got a B+, she was even more supportive of it because I did a good job.
How were you in science class besides this project?
I was pretty good. I love science. Yeah, I always loved science. I was pretty good in science.
Okay.
So.
I didn't know if you were like a CD student and then like you got to do the cannabis project and suddenly you're B+.
So yeah, it was and my so going back, I actually forgot to bring this up, but I would have never been born if it wasn't for Gainesville green.
No, that's a story.
Yeah, it's a real story. It's like 2 minutes. So basically, my dad was born in New York, lived up there, went to an all-Catholic boys' school, and continuously was getting in trouble at the all-Catholic boys' school. Got time to go to college, and basically the priest there was like, "What do I gotta do to get you to go somewhere else?" I mean, he did good. He got good grades, all that. But he's like, you should go somewhere else for college. You know what I mean? And my dad was reading a 1969 Playboy issue, and it was talking about University of Florida and the women of University of Florida, and it was talking about the dorm rooms and the partying and everything, and it mentioned they had the best cannabis or best weed down in Gainesville green. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna go to UF. And so he moved all the way down here, came here in 72, and then a few years later, I was born in 87. I think him and my mom met in the 80s, but it was he would have never been here, would have never came down here if it wasn't for the Gainesville green strain, and that's why he moved down here to go to UF. And then next thing you know, I happened. So I found this out like a year and a half ago when I was doing one of these interviews, and then I called and was talking to my dad, and he's like, you know what? You never would have happened if it wasn't for Gainesville green and that 1969 Playboy issue. So I went on eBay and bought the issue. I have it at home.
There you go. Yeah. It's funny how we spin that story because I would have been like, hey, I wasn't born if it wasn't for Playboy.
So yeah, I mean, it's been wrapped up in my history. I mean, like I said, my mom and dad were they were cannabis users and still are, and but it was never anything that was like pushed on me or anything. I just naturally fell into it.
So
tell me what you want to know.
I mean, how's Gainesville been with this? How receptive have they been? When you go to the city of Gainesville, you're like, I want to start the Swamp City Gallery Lounge.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So I didn't tell them it was going to be CBD right off the rip. Obviously I was like feeling them out, but Gainesville's been super supportive, man. Our officials, our city officials, we actually just got, signed off on our final inspection today for the new location. We got a huge new location.
Where's this at?
716 North Main Street, right on the corner of 8th Ave and Main Street. So right there where the old Walker Furniture buildings used to be.
Okay.
Yep, we're right there in the big 4,000 square feet building. We've got a huge bar area, big courtyard out back, galleries.
Is this open now, or when's it open?
Yeah, it's open now.
All right, cool.
Yeah. So we just, we're moving up and expanding. We're right off Main Street. We're not hidden back in the little cove behind the St. Francis House anymore. So, okay. They were super open to the idea, and needless to say, when we did our grand opening, we made the front page in the Gainesville Sun. And it was like Gainesville Sun was like, it said right across the big thing, and I was like, we've got it plaqued and wall at the shop, but it says CBD lounge and CBD dab bar opens in Gainesville, but basically it was just like CBD dabs and all bold print on the front page of the Gainesville Sun. And I was like, we've made it.
We did.
Like so, but yeah, I mean, as a whole, Gainesville is a pretty green dot in North Florida. I don't know if you know, but we have more dispensaries now in the city of Gainesville than any other city in the state.
There's a big one, I think, out towards Alaska.
Yeah, the grow. Yeah, that's Liberty Health's grow. Liberty Health Sciences, which is they bought out Chestnut Hill Tree Farm, and now they're growing out there in Alachua. Yeah. Okay. So Gainesville's been pretty receptive.
What do you think people, like, when people first hear of your business? What's their first like?
So it depends on if I hit them with the Swamp City Glass Gallery or if I hit them with the Swamp City CBD Lounge. If I hit them with the Swamp City CBD Lounge, you can definitely tell people.
How do you normally present it first?
So if I'm if I'm in a if I get the vibe that somebody might have preconceived notions about cannabis, I'm gonna hit them with the Glass Gallery and kind of ease them into it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But generally it's Swamp City CBD Lounge and Glass Gallery, and I like to. For the first while, I was trying to be super not blatant about everything. I was trying to be, a little hush hush and not put it in people's face so much. But now, we've got a reputation here in the town. We've got a huge following in Gainesville, and I'm pretty blunt, about what we do and how we do it, and I don't have any regrets about that at all.
Are people quick to judge?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We educate people daily who walk in the shop because they think it's something else, and then they when you tell them what it really is, a CBD lounge, they're like, oh, they want to turn around and walk away. And you say, hey, come here, let me talk to you. Let me educate you. Do you know what CBD is? What do you think it is? Well, this is what it really is. And then 9 times out of 10, they end up hanging out, buying a CBD pre-roll or getting some CBD oil or CBD gummies to try it out. I mean, that's not our goal. It's awesome if we make a sale, but our goal is to educate. And the lingering prohibition has been ever so real. We're going to make a short film one day about all the crap that we've dealt with about, opening up, getting our permits, payment processors, so like Clover, Square, all that stuff. We're on our 5th one now because of CBD.
Why?
They just, they find out you're selling CBD and they quote unquote don't approve, and they shut you off overnight without even warning you. So and a lot of times they do it on Friday when your biggest days are the weekends, especially if you own a bar and lounge, right? So they shut you off Friday night with no avail, and you lose money all weekend. That's happened.
Why?
CBD either.
I get that, but why would they care?
Because it's against their company policy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then some of them will allow CBD, but they won't allow the pipe that you smoke the CBD out of. And it's like, okay, they're like, you can sell pipes, but you can't sell CBD, or you can sell CBD, but you can't sell pipes. So, we've dealt with that. Right and left, we deal with people who have preconceived notions or think they know what it is, and there's prohibition is very real and still around today, and we deal with it all the time. And, when we go to we're looking at expanding right now. We're looking at expanding into Jacksonville and Miami, and when we call around, it's like 50-50, if we, because if I'm looking for a space, I'm going to tell you CBD lounge right off top, because I don't want to get into a space and then have to deal with something. And half of them are like, okay, well, you have a great day. It was nice talking to you. They don't even want to give me time of their day. So.
No, I mean, I could. My problem is the more I open my mouth, the more I fear it'll get political, and so I'm going to try not to do that, but also kind of get my questions to point, because I think a lot of people might have some of the same curiosities that I do. One of the things that just, it fires me up is just hypocrisy in general, and that's why I think this topic really kind of resonates with me, because I see a lot of it. Mm-hmm. I could talk about a ton of different topics of how that comes into fruition. One of them, I'm curious, especially going out to California, and not to say that couldn't happen anywhere, but you talk about strains and how certain strains are bred together. Mm-hmm. Is there a non-GMO movement of cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely. It's your craft cannabis movement. And it's basically fully organic soil, living soil, using pesticides, not using bottled nutrients, not using anything man-made, and creating that true cultivar off our old school breeding techniques, and creating the best craft grade cannabis you can. And it's just like with craft beer.
All right. See, I'm a believer that if you eat corn, then you eat GMOs, because corn as we eat it doesn't exist.
It's
like
the corn.
That's something that was
the
bred
old school
to be
corn
that,
doesn't even exist anymore.
And so I'm just thinking about,
I love corn.
Like I said, especially back in California, where it's like the hypocrisy of somebody that adheres to a strict non-GMO diet, but then goes and gets some bred hybrid plant for their marijuana needs, and I'm just like, you don't really know what you think you know. Yeah,
and I mean, there's a difference. Hybrid is basically just a combination of sativa and indica. Two different varieties, and that can still be craft grade, and that can still be done correct. But what you're seeing is commercial cannabis is starting to show its ugly. It's whatever you want to call it, but you have these people out there, these big companies that have no quality control because they're trying to mass produce cannabis, and so they're just filling warehouses full, and then you get this stuff that has been fed unnatural nutrients, has been pumped full of salts and phosphorus, and it hasn't been flushed properly, and then you smoke it, and you're smoking those nutrients that were put into the plant. So commercial cannabis that doesn't have proper quality control is definitely a problem and is an issue.
And then those items, what you said, what was those two words? One started with an S and one started with an I. It's like the
sativa and indica.
Right. That's like your mellow feeling and your high feeling?
Yeah.
Right?
So you have like a cerebral one that's more cerebral, it's more head high. So that's like your sativa, basically more energetic, more thinking, help you go about your day. And then you have the indica, which a lot of people refer as indica-couch. So indica, right. Indica-couch is basically body high. At the end of the day, relax, go to sleep. After dinner, you just want to relax and go to sleep. That's what the indicas are for.
And what component makes you really freaking paranoid?
So the high THC in sativas has a very good tendency to make you paranoid. So high THC content in sativas will make you overthink and become paranoid, definitely.
Okay, I was asking that one for a friend. So one of the other interesting things that I think is a huge component of this, like there's two big areas for me, that the opioid crisis we kind of touched on, and the other is, and I'll ask it kind of bluntly, but like if cannabis was made legal federally across the board tomorrow, what happens to the people that have been incarcerated on possession charges and the like?
Dang, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's a deep question, man. Well, hopefully.
That's why you should listen to this podcast for questions like that.
That's a real good question. Hopefully they would be released. I mean, we're sitting here. So basically, there's a meme going around in the cannabis industry right now. It says, when the cannabis store looks like an Apple store, it's time for people to get out of prison for small time cannabis possessions.
Amen.
So when you have huge corporate entities making millions and billions of dollars off of this thing, that you have people serving 20 years for like 2 grams a pot, life for like an ounce, like, you know what I mean? Like, you have destroyed umpteen thousand people's of lives, millions probably of lives, and over a thing that we're all, starting to celebrate, but they're getting forgotten.
Do we know what happened in the states where it became legal?
Some states,
like in Colorado, right?
Yeah,
Colorado, it's legal to smoke weed.
Yeah, and some states have started doing that. I have to assume
that they put people away for.
Yeah, absolutely. So
what happened to those people?
So certain states have started retroactively going back and clearing small time cannabis possession or cannabis charges. Absolutely, Washington has started doing so. I don't know if Oklahoma is. Oklahoma just started doing it. California has talked about doing it.
What states is it legal?
Oh man, it's almost 30.
Like 30?
Yeah, so you have medical and then you have recreational, but it's over half of the states are either medical or recreational or some combination.
Do you have any idea how many are recreational?
Not off the top of my head.
It's smaller.
Yeah, it's like, I want to say between 10 and 15.
Okay.
So,
do you think that that's going to change? Do you think, if you had to guess, if you had to like pull out your crystal ball right now, all right, Collin, I'm looking into the future. Got my crystal ball. Is it legal across the country?
I say within the next 5 years, it'll be federally legal.
Okay.
Yeah. I think 2 is pushing it.
What's today's date? I just want to mark this.
Right.
I just want to know if you're right. We're going to go back. We're going to have you back in 5 years.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Hopefully I'll have like 50 locations by then. But yeah, if I think, we got close, and there has been bills that have been passed through, like our Senate and our House, talking about legalization and stuff, and most of them get shot down. But a big one was like the federal banking bill, where they're trying to get access for all these dispensaries to use the banking system legally. Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, man, we'll see it. Obviously, it depends on what happens in Washington, which we are not going to go there because I don't want to go down a political wormhole right now. But it depends on what happens in Washington. But I'm pretty confident within the next 5 years you'll see federal legalization.
I always think it's interesting because there's a lot of high-profile, high-ranking people that probably even vote against it that consume it.
Oh yeah, closet smokers, absolutely.
Yeah, and it just kind of blows my mind. I mean, we've been talking about how taboo it is for forever, but like Bill Clinton's "Rock the Vote, I Didn't Inhale" speech. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that and how crazy that was.
Yeah.
A president outwardly talking about an experience he had with cannabis. Is he presidential material? This is a whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think everybody that's been elected since then has probably had their fair share.
Oh, yeah,
they're not
absolutely.
strangers to.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, why? And if Elon Musk can go on a podcast and
it's legal there.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, but like, why? So why do we continue?
I remember he was like said on the podcast, it's legal here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
why do we continue?
That doesn't mean he didn't get a bunch of backlash because he did.
So
from people
yeah, absolutely. So and then there was like people like he got corporate backlash, from his company, all kinds of things. So it's
But still,
his Tesla stock is doing phenomenally right now, though.
Yeah, but it's still because of why though? Because somebody somewhere said that it was because of DuPont, right?
Yeah. Because some old guy somewhere was like, no devil's lettuce. Like,
Right.
You know what I mean? That's honestly what it boils down to, because I'm going to sit here and tell you right now that if we let it, and this is a quote, I said this a year ago when I was being interviewed, and I did not know Jack Harrar said this quote, but I will give him credit to this quote now. But if we let cannabis, it will save the world. And I'm not like outlandish when I say that, but when you look at what's going on right now with hempcrete and hemp plastics and hemp ethanol, and hemp can save us from our fossil fuel dependency and potentially reverse global warming. So there's like huge things. It's not just about smoking weed anymore. It's not just about getting high in your basement anymore.
So my question is, if people didn't abuse it and get high, would we be on that path?
No, I don't think we would be on that path yet, because the prohibition and the reefer madness would have still happened. You know what I mean? It would have still happened because it wasn't about getting high. It was just about politics. Everybody was getting high back then. They were still getting high, but they were getting high off of different stuff. It's never been about getting high, in my opinion. It's been about politics and control. And because there's plenty of things out there you can get high. I mean, you could go lick a toad right now and get blasted out of your mind. You know what I mean? Like
that might be one of my favorite sound bites on this episode.
So you know what I mean? There's plenty of ways to get high. I don't think it's ever been about getting high.
You can run cars off of ethanol, and people abuse it every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find that kind of hypocrisy absolutely absurd. That it to me it's the same. It's if people abuse alcohol, you get behind a wheel, and it's one of the worst things you can do as a human is operate a machine that you're incapacitated to drive, right?
Yeah.
But we do it, and we handle it. We handle it different ways. Like the person that's addicted to opioids, we say, oh, that's a disease. But the person that abuses marijuana is, oh, that's a lowlife.
Yeah, he's a pothead. He's a stoner. Yeah, absolutely.
And we stigmatize this in different ways, and I don't understand it.
The greatest hypocrisy of it all to me is that you have like these people that are like, no cannabis, but they're sitting there holding a Xanax bottle. No cannabis, but they're clutching antidepressants. No cannabis, but they go home and they take a couple shots of scotch every night and pop a Xanax and go to sleep. Well, that Xanax and that scotch over 40 years is going to kill you, but cannabis won't.
I'll even take it one step further from a behavioral standpoint, and I'll be real for a second. When my brother got his second DUI for driving under the influence of alcohol, it was a real eye-opener for me. And the reason why was not my relationship with alcohol, but it was like, what reckless behaviors do I have? And for the next 6 months, as he was going through that situation, I looked real hard at something as simple as my texting and driving.
Yeah.
Because I looked at it as, wow, I am more reckless continuously every time I get behind a wheel because I've got this thing in my hand than the couple times that somebody maybe didn't gauge whether they were safe enough to drive. And this is something that we do soberly every day.
Yeah.
And that opened my eyes much more than the fact that, like, you're a little buzzed and I don't mean to underplay it, but like, are you a little buzzed and maybe not making the best decisions, or is that like how we stigmatize that?
Yeah.
There's things that we do soberly, behaviorally, that we joke about or kid. Oh, you shouldn't.
It's socially accepted.
But we accept it.
Yeah.
Even if we accept it with a little bit of cringe, we accept it versus something that's really shown no.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's okay, though.
No, it doesn't. But when you compare it to marijuana, there's really shown no ill effects. It's not shown behavioral dependency. It's not shown addiction. It's not shown anything other than the stigmas that we've adopted because they've been passed down generationally.
Yeah.
So where did that start?
DuPont.
Yeah.
Screw DuPont. No, I don't know. I never heard that before.
I don't know the history.
The guy that orchestrated all of it was Henry Anslinger, and he was the one that teamed up with DuPont and other people. Did you know Henry Ford made a hemp car? I know I'm just like bouncing around here, but back then, Henry Ford made a completely hemp plastic car. And that thing was basically hidden from everybody because of DuPont and the plastics and fiberglass and everything. They didn't want anybody to know about that. So that car that Henry Ford built out of completely hemp plastics back in the 50s or 40s was completely hidden. And just now in the last 10 or 15 years, you're seeing videos and like old archives about this hemp car that Henry Ford built that was buried because they didn't want anybody to know about it, about the possibilities that hemp could bring.
Sound like a conspiracy theory? You buying it?
I don't know.
Google it. Yeah.
I'm just kind of, it's just so interesting because like I hear you talking about the opioids and like all this sort of stuff, and I'm like, okay, like I hear what you're saying, but all right, so take cannabis. Like where did it start going down this path?
Yeah.
Right. Like where, because obviously there was things that happened throughout the course of history that led it to where it's at. Right. And so it's just, I mean, I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating.
Historically, obviously it's everywhere in the world. And I think of like Amsterdam is one of the places most people think of, but is it predominantly an American thing, or like where did?
Yeah. The prohibition is definitely predominantly American thing. Now there is some like big prohibitions in like Middle Eastern, like not Middle Eastern, but like, like Asia and stuff like that. Like the Asian kind of like Japan, Tokyo, places like that have really strict cannabis laws, and I don't pretend to know where those stem from, but I know a majority of the globe, has been using cannabis in medicinal and ritualistic fashions since we can trace back in history books.
I was gonna say, can we trace back to the first time someone said, "Hey, there might be something to this plant," whether recreationally or medicinally, like where someone said, "Hey, there's value here." Do we know when in the
they found they found remnants in tombs and mummies of cannabis that was basically mummified, and in the tombs they found cannabis back then that was being used. So obviously it's been being used for medicinal and ritualistic purposes since before we were ever even thought of, and it's just something that, due to prohibition and a couple men teaming together to demonize something, it took this wild and crazy path through history, and it's crazy to think that, you know, back in the 40s and the 30s and the 50s, did you know that like one of our bills, like I think it was either the $5 or $10 bill, like had hemp farmers on it? George Washington was a hemp farmer. You used to have to pay your taxes, and like you had to farm hemp. You know what I mean? So like this was part of our country, part of our culture, and then all of a sudden it was demonized and wiped from everybody. And what's crazy about like one of my general manager at the shop, he's another huge advocate for cannabis, Tony, and he is the one that informed me about. He was a nurse in the nursing system and stuff like that, and he informed me of the increase in non-developmental diseases in the U.S. Like that we've seen in a hike in the past like 30, 40 years. And he's a huge believer, and it makes sense that back then in the 30s and 40s, all of our food that we eat was fed hemp. Like, so everybody farmed hemp, and all the stalks and all the leaves were given to cattle or pigs or whatever, and they were fed hemp and byproducts. So we had cannabinoids, natural occurring cannabinoids in all of our food and all of our grains and everything that we were eating. And when that was taken from us, that was all. They also took basically a weapon in our bodies to fight non-developmental diseases or disease as a whole. And so after that was taken from our diet and our society, you see over the next 40 years, disease and everything went rampant. And you know, there's a direct correlation there. That's all I'm going to say.
Love it.
It's been fascinating, man. It's been super educational. Like I'm not one. This is great about having the show. I'm not one to say whether it's right, wrong, whatever.
Absolutely.
I wanted to have a conversation, and I wanted. Especially after our last episode. It's so funny, like just having a mix of episodes and guests and just diving into a variety of topics. I was like, bottom line is for me, I'm like, Tyler has a business here in Gainesville, Florida. Mm-hmm. I want to hear about it. And I want to hear about I want to hear your thoughts on everything. And so this is, I don't know.
In an alternate reality, we would have had Tyler first, had samples, and then we would have done the episode with Lauren, and it would have got real deep.
So y'all gonna have to come on our podcast one day. We're doing one called the Ground Table instead of the Round Table.
Beautiful.
Okay.
And basically we sit around and smoke and talk about stuff. But yeah, y'all gonna have to come on our podcast one day. But yeah, man. I mean, I could talk about the history of cannabis and everything forever, but main thing I was going to say is if anybody out there is curious about it, come down to the shop.
So tell them where they can find you, where they can connect with you guys.
Yeah, 716 North Main Street. That's our physical location. We're right on the corner of 8th Ave and North Main Street. You can't miss it. Huge glass windows. We just got our signage put up out front. We've got a dedicated parking lot in the back. Swamp City Gallery Lounge on Facebook or Instagram. It's the same tag. And swampcitygallerylounge.com is our website. We've got our new store just got put up on there. So if, in light of COVID and everything going on, if you're not comfortable coming into the store, even though I assure you we are practicing safe practices, all the employees are wearing masks. We've got sanitizer stations all over the place. We were lucky not to be shut down, and we were deemed essential because of the CBD aspect of it. We had to close down the bar area. But yeah, I mean, we've been lucky to stay open through this whole thing. The city's been working with us. It's been great. But yeah, if somebody's not wanting to come in and do physical interaction, they can go onto our website, check out all of our products. We have an online gallery for our art. And then hopefully here soon we'll be starting up our live music. We usually do live music bands, acoustics, jazz, two-piece bands, stuff like that. So, we'll be starting those up hopefully when things get back to somewhat normal.
Beautiful.
Cool, man.
Can't wait for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Put that on the
be back in 5 years to see where things are at.
2025.
Yeah, so I mean, anybody out there who's if you're into art, glass, canvas art, CBD, music, anything in between, come by the shop. My glass manager Javier, he could sell a fish some water. I swear to God. So he kills it on the glass game. You'd be shocked to learn what some of these glass pieces are going for. Javi just sold over $7,000 worth of glass art this past weekend.
Wow.
We've got a single pipe in our shop that's $20,000.
Dang.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, but we've got stuff for $80 too. So we've got stuff for every budget. But we kind of pride ourselves on having all American made art by artists that we know personally.
Is it from all over the place?
Yeah, it's all over. It's all over the U.S. A lot of it is from Florida. We try and carry more Florida art than anything. Same with our beer and our wine. We carry Swamp Head, First Magnitude, Cypress and Grove, and then when we're talking about wine, we carry Island Grove wine, which is out in Hawthorne. So we try and stick as local as possible. But with the art, we do branch out to the nation, but we try and keep everything U.S. based.
So what makes a $20,000 piece of glass?
A lot of time and a lot of different artists collaborating on it. It's just like with any canvas art. So if you got a Picasso or if you've got a Salvador Dali or something like that, that's going to be way more than somebody else who did the same. Even though it's the same thing,
right.
It could be the same thing, but because that artist is well known for that piece and for that sculpture and what he does, that brings a lot more money. And it's just like with the canvas art. It's the same thing, and there's actually a lot more entailed to with glass because you think you're working with essentially molten lava or molten glass in order to shape it. So it takes a lot of skill and a lot of time.
It's cool.
Tyler, this has been fascinating, man. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming on the show. I mean,
I could talk forever, but if you want to hear any more, just come by the shop.
I had a good time. I enjoyed learning more about it, and I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
I'm really interested to know what you guys think about it. So, listening audience, everybody, definitely hit us up. Drop us a note. Find us on Facebook, Instagram at WHOA GNV. On Facebook, it's WHOA GNV Podcast. But find us. Drop Mike and I a note. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you think.
And
am I off base? Is Collin off base? Does one of us need to get with the times? I don't know.
You never know.
Yeah.
Tyler, thanks again, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
The WHOA GNV Podcast, the podcast bringing you businesses and individuals that make you go, whoa.
Give us your best whoa.
Whoa. I was looking at her. Sorry.
We'll see you later. Bye.